And hello, everyone. Welcome to the Centered on Excellence webinar series. We're so glad you're here with us today as we discuss surviving and thriving in the TV industry, finding your first job or your next job. And we've got a really great panel here to talk about it with us today as we welcome in from Cleveland, Ohio, WEWS TV news anchor Rob Powers, who I used to work with way back in Toledo, way back in the day. Rob, good to see you.
Good to see you, Dan. Good to see everybody.
We also have with us from Wish TV here in Indianapolis, Anthony Calhoun, sports director. AC, you've got some of your Emmys behind you there as well. We're looking forward to talking with you about networking and the importance of knowing people in the business and just finding your path in this wild industry sometimes, right?
That's right. Yeah, looking forward to it, man. Great to be with you, my man.
And also with us from IU, former WTHR anchor and reporter, Ann Ryder. Ann, good to see you again on our webinar series.
Good to see you, and your timing is perfect because we've got broadcast students about ready to graduate and looking for the first job.
And a recent graduate of yours, in fact, Griffin Gonzalez with us as well, who went to IU. And Griffin, you're in Louisville now. Do I have that correct?
Freelancing for Louisville right now and waiting for that next contract. So kind of in between right now.
All right. Well, then let me introduce you to the news director on our panel, Jonathan Shelley from WPTA in Fort Wayne, who's also a member of our board of governors with NATAS. And Jonathan, I know we're going to have a lot of questions for you today about what students should put on a resume reel, what people should know about the business. We're so glad you're with us, and thank you for being with us today as well.
Good to be here. Rumor has it I might be hiring for a few positions.
See there, you never know what we can make happen.
Perfect.
Right? Exactly. Well, Rob, let me start with you because we all take different paths within this industry, and you have an interesting story to tell as well, because you spent many years doing sports. Now you do news. You've been here in our region in Indianapolis, in Cleveland, and in Toledo, and also in a very big market, the biggest market there is, New York City. Tell us a little bit about your path and what took you from this region to New York City, and also from sports into news.
When I was a kid, my dad was involved in TV. I tagged along with him. He did color commentating for football and basketball. So as a kid, it was a chance to hang out with the old man for a night. But then as I got a little older, I was really interested in what they were doing in the truck. So I spent half the game in the truck and half in the booth. And that really got me going. I went to college for one reason, and that was to be a sports anchor. That was it. There was no plan B. Graduated, took me 2 years to find a job. I was driving a tractor for 2 years, sending out resume tapes to every small market I could think of. And finally got a job 2 years later. Did sports, and like you said, just opportunities just started coming as markets changed. And in Toledo, they asked me to anchor at 5:30, so I anchored 5:30 to 6 and still did sports at 6 and 11. That went okay. We did some. I mean, you were involved in a lot of this, Dan. We did some stuff that really got popular in Toledo, and that caught the eye at the time. The ABC station there was owned by Disney, so they were looking for a place to put me, and it ended up being New York. Did weekends there, and then bumped me up to the weekday sports anchor. And again, just opportunities just happened for being in the right place at the right time. So they let me fill in on the news desk while I was still doing sports. Network saw it. I was able to do some things on Weekend Good Morning America. And it just progressed from there. And that got me thinking, maybe news is where the future is for me. And lo and behold, Channel 5 in Cleveland called. And my kids were getting older. My parents were getting older. It was just a chance to finally do what I do in my hometown, and I jumped at it. So my wife and kids and I moved here, and it's been great so far.
And back in your hometown doing the news, it's really a great story.
I've never done what I do in front of people that I know, which think about that. And yeah, I get texts from my mother. I think she learned how to text because she had to communicate right away. So I get texts from my family while I'm sitting there. I've never had that. I've been doing this well over 30 years, and it's a new thing for me. So it's kind of cool.
That's great. That's great. Anthony, I know you went to Syracuse University, which
Yeah.
opened probably for you a lot of doors in terms of networking in this business, because obviously Newhouse is such an important institution in television. And so many people that you worked with there are in so many different parts of the industry now. And so many people that you've worked with in your sports department have gone on to do other things too. I mean, it's almost a two-way street, the mentoring that we all experience in this business, isn't it? From the people we work with or go to school with, and then the people who work with us.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. I just recall one of the reasons why I wanted to go to Syracuse. I knew everybody there wanted it just as bad as I did, to be on television, be a sportscaster, be in news, you name it. And having that opportunity to go to school there, I always knew I was competing against the best. But one thing I did learn from my time there was about, if you're going to make in this business, you got to be able to network. And I have tried my best to its fullest, been able to do that in everything I do, and especially in our industry when it comes to television, the broadcast industry. I talk to young people all the time about this, that intern for us in our program at Wish TV, about, listen, what you learn in school is great, but it's when you get out of school, going to those conferences, finding that mentor, staying connected with them by networking. Just over on my left side here, there's a picture of me and Jim Nance together. I wouldn't have him as a mentor in my life if it weren't for him coming to Indy for a Final Four 20 years ago. And he saw me on TV and he told me I had a little talent. And then I said, you know what, I got to figure out a way to stay connected with this guy. And so ever since that day, we've been connected. He's done some incredible things for me in my career, for us watching my video, watching my tape, critiquing me, and just also opening up opportunities for me down the road as well. So you cannot network enough in our industry, because there are tremendous benefits at the end of the day when you do that.
Hello, friends is a saying we all need to take to heart in this business.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah,
That's a great story. AC, we appreciate that. And you have, just like Rob, found a different path within the industry. You were at WTHR for a long time. Now you're there at Indiana University, teaching the next generation of students. You've seen both sides of that. Tell us a little bit about the importance of networking as you look to create your path in this industry for the first time, or your next path if you're looking to take on a new role.
That's super important. That's one of the reasons we have people like Jonathan Shelley, who's going to talk in a minute, come to to our journalism school and speak to the students and do an anchor boot camp. But if I can, I'd love to. I tell my students this story. I graduated, I'm dating myself here, but when we had double-digit inflation, hiring freezes, nobody was hiring. I went to University of Missouri, had a great reel, I thought, and could not get a job. So what I would do is I'd call markets kind of around my hometown of Indianapolis. Dayton was one, Toledo was one, Evansville, Fort Wayne. And I would say, hey, I'm going to be in town. Do you have 10 minutes to look at my reel? And usually the news directors would respond to that, and so I would get in, they would give me some advice. I'd take the advice to heart. And it was one of those news directors who didn't have a job when I came in, who the minute he had one, I was the first he called, and that was Terre Haute. So I actually started at THI in Terre Haute. And, it's just, it was a lesson in persistence. And so I didn't have that many contacts, but I do now. And so now I'm calling on all the contacts that I've gleaned throughout my almost 30 years in the business to come and get a look at our students. And the business has changed as well. So I'm having to learn about the skills that I must teach now. We didn't used to have to carry the camera as reporters. They do now. We didn't, they do it all now. So those are things where my learning curve is going up as well.
Jonathan, as a news director, you've made your own path within this industry to the position you're in now, and you've worked in a number of different markets around the country. And from your perspective, you also have a good sense of how important a lot of this is in the industry when it comes to networking, when it comes to persistence. You're the one who gets persistently bugged by people who want that job. And I hate to say I hate to use the word bugged, but I think sometimes when people are persistent and try to look for that job, they have that worry, right? Am I bugging this person, or am I advocating for myself and being persistent? You're the person who gets those calls and those emails. What's your perspective on all that?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing I would say is read the room. Get a sense of whether you're overstaying your welcome with someone by reaching out constantly. Because in a lot of cases, I welcome and invite people to stay in touch with me, whether it's through LinkedIn or email or in person when I meet someone. One of the things I'll tell them is, hey, in 3 months, send me another reel to take a look at. Reach back out. But do me a favor, remind me who you are. Be real clear. I cross paths with a lot of people. Say I'm the guy you spent 15 minutes with talking down at IU. In the spring of 2022, you told me to work on this, and I did, and now I'm sending you the reel. What do you think? Generally speaking, there's ways to stay in touch with people that aren't, bordering on harassment. Even a busy news director or anyone else you wish to have as a mentor. The good news these days is it's so much more easy to communicate electronically, to send something that can be available on demand that I can look at when I've got 15-20 minutes of free time. I have the same kind of experience Ann did 32 years ago when I graduated college, and I drove from Chicago to the tip of the Northeast, and started in New Hampshire, I think it was. I didn't quite make it to Maine, and drove all the way to my hometown in South Florida, doing the same thing, having to call ahead, catch people, and say, "I'm going to be in town tomorrow. Can you give me 15 minutes?" And now it's so much easier with online conference calls to get face to face with people at various times, and then to follow up, and then where possible, bring them in for that one-on-one conversation, which is also very valuable. But definitely, if you can establish any kind of a dialogue ahead of time before you're in the market for that job, whether it's your first job or a future one, establish it 6 months out. Say, here's where I am now. Get the feedback so it's something you could act on and become better when you're ready to move on to that position, and then reach back out to that news director and say, what do you think?
And Griffin,
Jonathan, can I?
Yeah, go ahead. Ann.
Can I ask you something just real quickly? I heard that it's good for students to get up very early and be the first one to send you an email, so that when you log on to your email that morning, you're going to see theirs. Is that true?
I don't think it hurts, because one of the things I do in the morning is make sure I haven't missed anything since I was last, checking on the emails.
Okay.
Then during the course of, today, this is, oh gosh, I've done one interview for an open position, 40 minutes on the phone with someone. I've had a department head meeting today. I had my morning meeting at 9:30. I sent a lengthy email back to the head of the local Republican Party, who had some feedback, let's put it that way, about how we covered an event yesterday. And now I'm on this call. So, you think about what slipped into my email in the last 4 or 5 hours. I don't know. There's some likely stuff backed up there that I haven't checked, but the first thing in the morning I do before I even get out of bed is start going through emails.
Okay.
So not a bad idea.
Yeah, I sent
Good
you an
to know.
email a little while ago, Jonathan, about some stuff we're doing on the Board of Governors, but I hadn't heard back yet. No, I'm just kidding.
Your emails I always get.
There you go. Right. Griffin, you're seeing all of this right now as a recent graduate, somebody who's in the job market and working freelance. What do people, who've been in the business perhaps a long time, who are always giving advice to people in your generation, maybe not realize about, what it's like right now breaking into this business? And that could very well be different than it was, when we started out.
Yeah, I think the big thing for me is, just how important relationships are. That is the first big lesson I've learned kind of in the past few months. And I go back to one of the first relationships I go back to is actually on the call right now. AC, when I was a senior in high school, I saw him covering a football game. Or basketball game, excuse me. I was doing play-by-play for my high school radio station. He came up, gave me a high five, and I looked him right in the eye and said, "I want your job." And he laughed, and he's like, "Great. Send me an email." Within the week, I was touring the station at Wish. He was being a mentor to me, and that relationship has carried in 5+ years now. I've even interned for him. I had that opportunity, and he's taught me a lot of what I know about the business today. So relationships matter. And then the other thing I tap into is, maintaining a relationship is important. It's not just sending your reel every 6 months. It's, I can't tell you how many articles I sent to a news director because there was a national news story about this thing that happened in, let's just say Lansing, Michigan, or they had a parade, and I had a conversation with their news director once. So I shoot them that email and say, hey, just saw this. This is awesome. Thinking about you. That way you're staying fresh in their minds, and they know you're not just out there to get info. They're not just out there. You're out there trying to actually have a relationship with them and be a friend. And then when that job does pop up, guess who one of their first call is? And the final thing is that kind of relationship building actually led me into my gig with Louisville. They were short-staffed. They weren't ready to hire somebody yet. They needed somebody who could cover Indiana basketball in Bloomington, and they knew that's where I was. Because I had that relationship, because I hadn't really, I was more out to just get to know them and have a relationship with them there rather than have that job offer in hand. It led to that. And it's just so important to be able to be a relationship builder in this business, not just as a storyteller, but for your own benefit and finding the right job and finding the right place. So I would say that is so crucial. And then as far as where the business goes today, I mean, the demand for good storytellers is through the roof right now. Stations need people who can tell good stories, and not just on TV, but audio and social media, and find a way to be multidimensional and do it all. So if I had to pass off any advice for somebody who's looking to get in that job search field here in the next few months or next few years, find a way to become a great storyteller and find a lot of different ways to do it. And now's the time to really practice that and try new things and challenge yourself, because once you graduate, those opportunities come, few and far in between. So use it while you still can.
And Griffin, you started out while you were still in school, or still now, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's
He's
great.
still there now. He
That's
graduates
right.
next week.
That's right. I called him a recent graduate. I meant to say.
I had my last in-person class yesterday, so we can go with it. We can
go with recent graduate.
Let's go ahead and wave the finish line now, right?
Right, exactly. So AC, you've had a lot of interns come through, a lot of other people in your sports department come through, and we talk about relationship building and team building. I know you do an awful lot to kind of maintain that sense of team, maintain that relationship that you have with people who come through your sports department, come through your station. And as Griffin said, that's not just a relationship that is there in that moment as you're working together, but one that can continue afterwards and be fruitful in many ways, even after you're working with someone that you have that kind of relationship with.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting you bring this up. Just yesterday, a friend of mine who I was giving a tour to, he and his family at the station yesterday, and he played a huge role in helping me getting certain access when I was covering the Super Bowl this past year in LA. I mean, relationships are critical, and I try to talk to that. I try to, I share that message with my sports team, all the time about how, our relationship in our department is critical, that we're all on the same page, that we're all, not looking at I, but looking at team. And, one thing that impresses me so much about interns that we've had in the past is I'm not a big fan of interns being selfish, because I know in our business, it's not about I, it's about team. You got to be a team player. And I think future employers, they look at that. They look, when they're calling references. One thing I do when we're hiring people in our department or we're hiring interns, I ask them, are they a team player? Are they not just about themselves? And so I think that is so critical for a young person starting the business, to show that you are a team player, show that you're willing to take on different tasks. It doesn't always have to be the way you want it all the time. And I think it makes you better by doing that. But the relationships, as I mentioned before, Dan, they're critical. They open up a lot of doors for you down the road. I've broken many stories because of the relationships I've developed here in Indy, but even with future employees that we've had, or Sage Steele, ESPN, I replaced her. I remember talking to her before I took the job, and to that day, 24 years ago, we still stay connected because of that relationship. And so going back to what Griff said as well, you have to be linked in. You got to be connected. And you can't say that enough, because I think we all know, we've been in the business for a long time. A lot what we do has to do with the relationships we have to open up doors for us to get access to a story, to tell a story better. Those opportunities you don't pass up.
And Rob, we were talking about this before the webcast started. You always run into people down the road that you've worked with before or have connections in common. Just you and I, the stations that we've been at through the years, we always run into people that I used to work with who work with you now, or vice versa, or out at the Emmy National meeting last week, ran into a photographer who used to work with you in New York. I mean, those connections exist everywhere. It's really a small business.
It's everywhere. Along with what AC was saying, the term that I use is good newsroom citizen. That is the goal on one end. Everybody wants to know what you're like on the air, but in my view, are you a good newsroom citizen? Can you get along with people? Are you a team player, like Anthony said? I'll tell you a story about relationships. I was a sports anchor in Toledo, Ohio, covering a Bowling Green State University basketball game. Bunch of crazy college kids screaming. I'm just sitting in my.
I might have been one of them. I was in BV there. Right?
So one guy in khakis and a sweater was duck walking, so he didn't get in anybody's way, but duck walked in front of the crowd and said, "Excuse me, Mr. Powers, can you take a look at my resume?" That was you, man. And I took that resume to the news director the next day, and I said, "This kid is going to be something." That kid is now one of the best news anchors in the country. And I've known Dan, since he was at BG. So it's relationships like that. I tell kids all the time, Monday's associate producer is Tuesday's producer, is Wednesday's executive producer, is Thursday's assistant news director, is Friday's news director. Right. You have to make sure that you're a good newsroom citizen with everybody. The cleaning staff. What are their names? The security guards, what are their names? You have to establish relationships in every way that you can.
Floor directors, everybody you work with. I appreciate it, Rob.
That's great.
Always grateful for your guidance coming up through Toledo. And Rob, I should say also, put me on the air.
Yes.
My very first television appearance, not as a reporter or as an anchor, but as a referee, dressed in a referee outfit, coming on the Powers Pack High School highlight show to throw a penalty flag or give a touchdown sign. And
I have
a big get there in television.
When it's needed.
That's right. Oh, that's great. All right, we've got some questions that folks have in the business, and a lot of them are questions that come up a lot, that you've probably heard a lot. Pull up some of those here on the screen here as we probably send a lot of these to Jonathan because of his role as a news director. Let's start with this one here, Jonathan. What kind of clips should I use on my resume reel? What should I put first? Do you still want a slate? Back in the day, you'd put on that slate that has your name, your address, your phone number. Does that really matter on the reel now that you're looking at it probably on YouTube and not on a tape that doesn't get separated from a resume? What's your advice for young journalists about some of those questions?
Yeah, I'll start off with the easy one, the slate. Absolutely. And I would make it a complete slate, have your email address, your phone number, and any website or YouTube address you want me to be aware of. I will not just, you might say, well, it is my YouTube address. Well, do you have a page that has more than one video? A lot of times I will seek out people's base YouTube page so I can look at more than just the reel that they sent me, see what else they've put on there. So if you've got a YouTube site or something else that's got multiple videos on it, include that there as well. I will forward that a lot of times to my general manager, to our corporate recruiters, to other folks. So putting it all in one place is super helpful. As far as what should be on the reel, that hasn't changed dramatically as far as I'm concerned over the years. I'm looking for a minute or so off the top that just shows me what you look like, what you sound like, how do you dress. Give me the basics, a little montage that shows you in different settings if possible. Something in a studio setting, something in the field, maybe an active stand-up of some sort. Show me your best variety that you have. Nothing that needs to go more than 5 clips, maybe 6, short, 5 to 10 seconds each is all I need. It gives me that first impression. Then dip to black, come back up. If you want to put a slate on that says packages, live shots, whatever you want to identify, that's fine. But mainly what I'm expecting now to see is your capacity to tell a story and report something in the field, in a studio, on a pre-recorded package. Give us your best 3 to 4 items, whatever they may be. I'm looking for potential, not perfection, when I'm hiring someone out of a university. That means a good understanding of the concept. What's the story I'm telling? Am I clear with what I'm telling you? Is my editing clean? Is my photography generally good? Did I mic people up properly and use decent lighting? The basic technical skills, along with the content of what you're telling me. Is it a well-written story? Does it show use of natural sound? Does it use emotive sound bites? Is it just a good topic to get into that interests me? 3 or 4 of those stories is really all I need. I know you're a college student in many cases. I know what I'm looking at is either, in most cases, something that you did for a class, something you did for an extracurricular news organization on campus, or possibly something you did in an internship. A few people do have other opportunities to express themselves and put together packages that might have aired on a local television station. I've hired people while they're still finishing college, and they've had opportunities in the past. But that's unusual. So again, we're not looking for necessarily the story that could lead world news tonight, but I am looking at how you present yourself. Do you look professional? Do you know how to deliver the copy? And do you know how to write a script and put together a package? What the actual topic is secondary. But bonus points if it's something that is obviously an enterprise story, something that you came up with to develop, and not something that was just sitting there in front of you, because that's one of the real, I'd say, valuable assets for some people who come into this business, is the ones who are bringing ideas to the table, developing sources, and putting unique content on the air, not just taking an assignment that's handed to them and doing an okay job with it.
So here's another one along those lines, Jonathan. Should I send my resume everywhere? What size market should I target? It's realistic for a college student to be able to get hired right out of college and into Fort Wayne. I was lucky enough to be able to do that in Toledo. Perhaps the threshold for what size a market would hire someone out of college has even gone even further, larger and larger markets that might be willing to hire someone out of school right now if they seem to have the right experience, and especially in the producing track, I imagine, where it's been hard to find producers, right, Jonathan? How do you answer a question like that? What size market should I target coming out of school?
Yeah, I saw a producer get hired by first job last 2 weeks ago in Orlando.
Wow.
Now they're probably taking the overnight weekend shift or something like that, but it's Orlando. One of the big network affiliates there. And this person came from, an extremely highly regarded university with all, it had everything. This is, that's your exception, but it happens nowadays. And so, I hate to tell people not to apply for things, but you also don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're in over your head. The reality is, if you come to a Fort Wayne as a producer or as a reporter, you're going to get great opportunities and some opportunities to fail without falling flat on your face. But also the expectation there is that you're going to need some feedback on a daily basis, coaching coming from not just the news director, but the anchors, the senior reporters on staff, the producers that have been around for a while. And that's an expectation. The larger markets, there might be less of a tolerance or a patience for that, and less time to invest in it. I don't think you could apply that universally, though. I think you still got to understand, what's the job, what's the station, what's the circumstance. Certainly I would say anyone who has strong foundations as a producer is going to be in high demand. In markets that maybe 10 years ago would not have considered someone straight out of school. We find ourselves competing in Fort Wayne with much larger markets for the folks that have, again, ticked all the boxes. They've got the internships. They, were the executive producer of their on-campus news magazine program. They graduated at the top of their class. But not everybody who comes out of school is turnkey ready And I'm talking to multiple people today
Yeah.
for positions that I know are going to need training. And that's something that we're willing to do, certainly in Fort Wayne's market size, about 110. And I imagine almost every news director in markets 80 and below are probably going to tell you the same thing. I just hate to tell people, look, if there's a market you really feel strongly about, apply for it. You never know.
Yeah. And what's your perspective
Hey,
on that
Dan.
question
Oh.
from your perspective?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
One thing that I tell my students is learn as much about as many different aspects of the business as you can. So that's why we teach them how to produce. We work on the anchoring skills. We work on the storytelling skills. Social media has become more important than ever before. And if you can deliver the kind of social media report that is not just a regurgitation of the package, that has some video extras and that kind of thing, they'll love you. When I started in Indianapolis, news director knew this wasn't the job I wanted, but I wanted into the market. I knew how to produce. I didn't love producing, but my first job to break into the Indianapolis market was as a weekend producer. And then as soon as he had a full-time anchoring job, I did that. And you never know what it is you're going to love. I always tell the students that their first job is probably, they'll work hardest in their first job. Stakes may not be as high, but they're going to get a chance to do it all and work a lot of overtime and all those kinds of things. So we try to teach them as many skills as possible so they can be versatile.
And what are you encouraging your students to do in terms of market size and finding a job in the right kind of market too? No, no worries.
So realistically, start in a market. First of all, pick your area, pick an area that you're going to be comfortable in. If family is really important to you and the family of origin, you're going to be miserable if you land 700 miles away. So again, I knew I wanted to be near Indianapolis, so I drew kind of a radius. I'm a big believer in not starting too big because you will have mistakes, you will have failures. I'd say for market size, go, interview the station as much as they interview you.
Yes.
There are some stations
Ask a lot of questions.
that
Yeah.
are excellent and will have your back and aren't going to send you out to a carjacking to do your own live shot at 11 to 11:30. You've got to ask the kind of questions so you know that they've got you. That if you have a certain kind of story, you're going to get a photographer for that story. So I think it's more important to go with the kind of quality station and news philosophy than just take it on market size. There are some small markets that are absolutely terrific and really better stations than some of the mid-sized markets. I'm not a big believer in starting too big unless you're a producer and you really have it together and you can get the job, like such as the person in Orlando.
Or such
Market
as
size.
Yeah.
I was going to say market size is also it can be very misleading. There are some markets that feel smaller than they are because they're spread out across multiple states with multiple small cities making up the bulk of the population. There are others, Fort Wayne probably fits in this category, but certainly we're not exclusive, where you've got more of an urban feel, even though it's a small market, because most of the population is concentrated in a city. And those tend to give you different kinds of experiences. So again, ask yourself, like Ann said, what's the circumstance? I know I was talking with one of my peers who had just a tremendously difficult time recruiting for a position in a good market because the position was a one-man bureau that was like an hour and a half away from the rest of the station, and rightly, understandably so, people were hesitant to go into that situation where they were on their own and didn't get a lot of feedback and were kind of isolated from the rest of the pack. So again, know the situation that you're interviewing for. It's not just about market size.
And Griffin, you're someone who in school targeted the Louisville market, got a job in the Louisville market freelancing. That's fantastic. How do you see this question? Sky's the limit, or, for you, was that kind of a regional thing? You're right there. You're near Louisville. It's a pretty big market, but it was a great fit for you.
You know what? When I first met Ann Ryder my sophomore year of college, I remember her talking to the class, and she's just like, guys, you're interviewing the station as much as they're interviewing you. And as a sophomore, I was kind of like, and with all due respect, if I get the job, I'm going to take the job. Okay. Like that's what I care about. And looking back on it, she was exactly right. I think market size is great. And I was having this conversation with AC just 2 months ago. Market size is cool and all, but at the end of the day, you have to go to the spot where you're going to be able to thrive best and get the opportunity to do the stories you want to do as much as possible. You might want to be a sports guy and, you might take a news MMJ job and the station might say, hey, you're going to get to do a couple sports stories a week, and you might pick that one over a totally sports job in market 120 because this is a top 100 market. But if you're trying to be a full-time sports guy, you're going to want to have as much sports stuff on your reel as you can get. And market might not be as glorious. That might be in a small town in Texas, but in that small town in Texas, you're going to get reps. And I always say, in my opinion, working in TV is a lot like working on a free throw shot. The more and more you do it, the more and more reps you get, the better you get. So getting those reps are so important. And if you can do that at market 50, great. If you can do that at market 120, great. I think market size is something that is great when you're, more years into your career, but when you're young and you're really just getting started, what you really want to focus is what station is going to give me the most opportunity possible for me to grow and thrive.
Yeah. Rob, I want to come to you on this market size question too. Yeah.
Yeah.
You worked in market number 1, where I assume everything always probably went flawlessly, right?
Exactly. You're exactly right. Never any problem. No, what I always say is I didn't work any harder in New York, than I did in Binghamton, New York. In my first job, you busted your tail every day, no matter where you were. The only thing that changes is the view on your drive to work. Inside those 4 walls, the work is the work. You do whatever you can that day. And I don't even say you can't be your best every day. You got to be your best every broadcast. So you bust your tail no matter what you're doing, no matter what market you're in. Now, in terms of where you should target, shoot. I was driving a tractor for 2 years. I sent my resume tape to anybody who had an opening.
Yeah.
It didn't matter. From Maine to California, they had my 3/4 inch tape on their desk. I still have rejection letters. I kept every rejection letter. That was back in the day when news directors would type a rejection letter to you. Still have every one of them in my basement. And I still have right next to them boxes and boxes of VHS tapes. I watched myself. I would tape my 6 and 11 o'clock sportscast every night. Not only that, I would try to tape the competition to see what they were doing. So that's why it's a thrill for me right now to be on with Ann Ryder, because I have, I worked in Indianapolis when she was at 13. It's just, I have tapes of Ann Ryder in my basement.
Rob.
Yeah.
That's creepy. That's hilarious. Rob, I've got a quick story about you. Several years ago, I went to WABC to increase my own knowledge of what was expected of reporters in social media. Very quickly, the gentleman that I talked to, and I can't remember his name, I'm sure you know it, brought up an example of something you did. You were outside the UN. There was a huge storm coming. You and your photographer decided to do something on the fly for Facebook, I believe it was, on dodging the storm and doing the live shots in between. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Do you remember this?
I don't, but that doesn't mean it.
I've got it. So I've got it. And basically it was an example of somebody who's been in the business a long time, learning new tricks in order to get the hits. So I've got it on my computer. I could probably find it, but I'll have to send that to you because it's good. I use it in class, and it's you.
You never know what you can do in that moment to do the job. And believe me, in the moment, you're not thinking about anything beyond, I got to do the job. I got to do my job.
Right.
This is what I have to do. So you just every day, every broadcast, you just try to be your best.
Hey, Rob, this is a good question for you here too, since you made that jump from sports to news. What is your advice for someone thinking of trying a new role within the TV industry?
Everybody's situation is different. You have to take a look at everything. I always make decisions based on 3 things: what's best for me, what's best for my family, what's best for my career, in probably that order. And you have to get everything you do. So at that moment in my career, in my family's life and in my life, the jump was the right thing to do. I didn't know where the direction in sports and in local broadcasting was going. I had gotten a taste of doing some other things. And I said, maybe this could, project me into the next phase of my. So I say go ahead. And I've lost really good sports photographers who wanted to be sports reporters. And I told them, I'd love for you to be here the rest of your career shooting my highlights, but you wouldn't be happy. Go somewhere where you can do what you want to do. Do what you want to do. And he did. And he went, and now he's, a big time news anchor. So he went from a really good photographer to a really good sports anchor to a really good news. So you make the transition at the moment you think is best for you in your career. So far, everything's worked out, but the day is young.
This is a good question here. Ann, you see this in your students who may be asking, whether it's questions about salaries, questions about MMJing, questions about, as Rob mentioned, sports within local newscasts. Is that becoming a smaller circle of employees, with the sportscasts themselves maybe being a little shorter in terms of their duration and whatnot? Should we worry about the industry's long-term vitality? That's a really broad question, but you see it. You see probably students posing that question from time to time.
I have to
What
tell
say
you, I am worried about whether or not this is a sustainable model, because we have students who are really gung-ho to get into this, and they graduate with all the MMJ skills, and then by the time they're 25, be honest with you, they're burned out. They're thinking about maybe having children, and they're married by then, and they're making a jump out of news. And I'm wondering, there's a part of me, even though it's great to know as many skills as you possibly can, I'm hoping the pendulum kind of tips back a little bit to a part where they can have some kind of balance. It's just expecting them to set up the story, shoot the story, write the story, edit the story, and do their own live shot, then have two more ideas by the time of morning meeting. It's a little much. I think it would have been a lot for my generation as well. You can't just say, oh, they're the millennials and the Gen whatevers. So I want to pose that question, whether there's any chance that this will tip back a little bit so that we can keep good people in the business.
Jonathan, that's a good question for you, I think, as a news director here. What do you see along those lines?
I worry about the model, the pay, the burnout, et cetera. What I know is that 10 years from now, 20 years from now, and 30 years from now, there's still going to be a need for content providers, the people who can dig up the information, tell a good story. And so I don't know exactly what the model is going to look like, but I hope that this generation finds themselves a part of it, and that the next generation follows suit. I can make a very strong argument that with so many different ways of delivering information these days, it's probably more important than ever, since it's so accessible and it's so fast changing in its environment. And it's so important that a responsible individual be relied upon for that information. That we didn't used to have probably the threat of disinformation that we have today. So now more than ever, I think I'm hopeful that we turn out people who have an interest. However, I'll tell you, the pool is much smaller today than it was 10 years ago, and it's not. I don't think that that's strictly attributable to what we've seen maybe in the the last year or two. I think it's been building for a long time, and so I think it's incumbent on news directors. I think it's incumbent on general managers, on the companies that own the majority of the broadcast outlets.
And of course, there are fewer companies that own all the stations.
When I started in this business, I worked for a company that owned one television station. My second job was, you could say I went to a much bigger company. They doubled in size. They owned 2 television stations.
Wow.
And my third company owned 4 television stations. So you can see kind of where my origins were, and that was the norm. I now work for a company that's in 114 markets, and they're not alone. And so I think they carry an outsized responsibility now for the future of our business. And I know that several of the larger companies have very different approaches to the industry. You could make an argument that they could be broken down into a sales first, news first, maybe general broadcast first type approach. And at the end of the day, I'm pulling for the news first folks, hoping that they continue to invest in not just their stations, but the people within them.
You talk about salaries. RTDNA always has some really great info, and I did pull some slides here for this webinar in terms of TV news salaries and inflation. And some of the data is a few years old, but you can see, this kind of ebbs and flows. 2015, for instance, TV news salaries were really outpacing inflation. This graph goes through 2018, and of course, inflation lately has been going way up. So it'll be interesting to see how this data looks here in the coming years. But you look over the last 5 years, the last 10 years, it's slightly outpaced inflation, but we'll see where that's headed. Rob, you had a point on this here too?
No, what did it look like back in 1987?
You
It's
tell me.
always better for anchors.
I think all of us who are of a certain age on this call can attest that the challenges posed by entry-level salaries are not new.
No. No.
Those of us who got into the business 30 or so years ago were scraping, the bottom of the purse for that extra nickel to get the ramen. So,
and I'll be honest, even in my second job, in my second market, that was still legitimately a very big concern, is having enough money to pay the bills.
I took a part-time sports anchor job for $6.50 an hour. And the day I had a job interview to sell women's shoes to supplement my income was the day they made me full-time. And I thought,
But the cream rises to the top.
That's
does.
right.
And anchoring is more lucrative still. When Jonathan came to IU, one of the things we asked is, the students asked, or somebody asked, do you expect a counter offer on the first job? It's low salary, but do you expect them to counter because they believe in their skills? And Jonathan, you said,
I don't remember what I said, but I hope I'm consistent here. The reality is I'm locked in for the most part on a budget, and I'm personally making my first best offer. I'm not trying to mess around with people, and I don't want to get them to save a buck either. One of the probably misperceptions that's out there is that news directors and general managers are trying to cut corners wherever they can. And the reality is we're probably your biggest advocates for increasing pay, but we work in a system where it takes time, and there's a reality that we face in our budgets, and it makes us, sometimes have to say no when we don't want to, for new hires or people who are already on our staff.
Griffin, you see this as someone heading into the business right now. This is your chance too. Any other good questions here for Jonathan as you approach a career in television, or for Rob or AC, or those of us like Ann, who's been in the business and now in the world of education. So,
yeah, I think I was just hearing the contract stuff, and I know that's something I'm getting ready quite literally to do over the next few weeks. And I guess, I had a news director tell me once, in their opinion, you ask until you get the no for stuff on contracts. You ask for whatever, if you want time off, you ask until you get a no, because you'll never know unless you ask. Do you agree with that, or do you think that can come off sometimes too pushy? Because I know a lot of people feel like, this is a great job for me, I don't want to lose this, and I feel like if I'm too pushy and ask too much, they might just cut the cord.
I mean, I've never cut someone off because of that, but I've had countless cases where I've had to tell people, I can't. When I'm telling you this is what I can do, this is what I can do. And I make, accommodations if and when I can. But I have people, constantly. I just had one recent situation where, I offered a position at a certain pay rate, and the person came back and they wanted about $6,000 or $7,000 more. And that's, you should probably have a pretty good idea that's likely not going to happen. And they weren't BSing me, and I wasn't BSing them. It's just we were at a different place. And I never take it personally. And that's another thing I would stress is, don't you take it personally on the other end if someone's offering you less. I had a general manager in a previous market who had a saying that I think was a great thing. I've tucked it away. I've used it with other folks too. If you believe you are worth a certain pay point, go out there and get it. And if you can't get it, understand you may not be undervaluing who you are and what you can do, but you may be overestimating what the market can currently accommodate. And that's something you may not have as much control over. There are times where you come to me and I say I can't pay in. The next job you're offered, maybe they can. There are other times where it might not be as realistic. That at this stage of your career, that's not likely to happen. Not because you're not a good candidate for those jobs. It's just that's what the numbers are. I'd love to simply say it's greedy corporations and shame on all of our owners. That's not it. The reality is we're in a tight business. I think us old timers, and I'm 52. Back in the 80s and 90s, you couldn't trip over a stack of money in a newsroom. I mean, everything you did at a TV station was just, they were making money hand over fist. But the setup for television ownership has changed dramatically. Every time you're reading about the ratings of a network being so low these days for everything from news programming to entertainment programming, understand that 30, 40 years ago, there were 5 channels if you were lucky that you could pick up in your market at home. And, they were getting 30 and 35 and 40 and 45 shares. And now we're killing for a 7 share in prime time to sell, because everything has become fragmented to the Hulus and the Netflixes and the internet and Facebook and everywhere. So it's a different environment for the owners too. And it is still a business.
And here's a good question that some young journalists might have that would be a good one I think for Rob or AC, maybe Ann or Jonathan too. Should I get an agent if I'm on the air and I'm a young journalist? Should I get an agent and when?
AC,
Not now.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I would say coming out of college, no, I don't think you need an agent. I think it goes back to networking. That's what it goes back to, being able to network. We got Griff on the call here, and Griff has been great about that. That's the reason why he was able to have opportunity to be in Louisville while he's in college, which is unbelievable. Bravo to him for that. But it's all about networking. After your first job, depending where you want to go after that, then maybe you can dive into an agent. But I'll go back to what you guys were talking about earlier. Don't get too caught up on these market sizes. I was fortunate when I came out of Syracuse. I was blessed to have a job in that market, but I also worked I worked hard to have that opportunity. I was an intern my freshman year there, which led me to get the job on air there when I graduated. But I tell interns all the time that are in our department, listen, don't get caught up on the market size. Go to a place, and I can tell Griff has been listening to me, where you get the reps. Like, you need the reps. You need to practice. You need to make those mistakes. You need to learn. A couple years in a small market is perfect for you. When I just started in the business, when I came out of Syracuse, my ultimate goal one day was to be on ESPN. And so I knew, hey, I can't just jump from Syracuse to ESPN. So I need to get to a market where I'm covering an NFL team on a daily basis or a professional team. And so that's why getting a chance to come back home to Indianapolis, that's where I wanted to go. I thought I maybe would go on to ESPN, and all of a sudden I fell in love with Indy. So I've been there forever. But it's all about trying to get those reps, prepare yourself to go out to live your dream one day. And don't get caught up in those big markets at all, because the last thing you want to do is be in a big market. I learned this when I was in college from someone who's had a great career, told me this, that, you get into a big market and then you start making all these mistakes. Then it's like, it can mess up your career. Then you have a problem trying to get another job. So, hey, you got time, folks. You got time. Go out there, find a market that fits you. And like Ann said, do your research on that market. Understand the market. Understand that station you're talking about. And if it works, it fits, go for it. And you settled in there for 2 years. If that's how long you want to be there, or if it's a year, just to get the reps, the practice, the critique that you need, and then move on from that. But I think a lot of times, a lot of young people in our industry, they get so caught up in these markets. I wasn't in the top 50 or top 80. And it's like, hey, slow down, you have time.
Jonathan, some final thoughts from you. I know you've got to run here for a meeting in a little while.
Yeah, I chirped in real quick and said, no, that was directed to,
To college
specific-
students? Yeah.
Yeah, college students. There's just no reason for it. And there are some great agents out there, and I love working with them. Later in your career, it might be a good move, especially if you have very specific aspirations to work in a certain type of a market or a network level. But there's just no reason for it. And I can't imagine doing it right out of school. The jobs are out there. The agent isn't going to make you a better candidate per se. They can help get you indoors later in your career. That might be more difficult to get noticed in. But if you take some of the advice that you've heard today from everybody on this session to heart, I don't see any reason for it.
Ann Griffin, some final thoughts from you before we wrap things up?
Definitely get an internship, get more than one internship, get those internships while you're in college. When you write a letter, don't forget saying thank you. Don't forget snail mail thank you letters. My best stories always came through snail mail. And when you do your resume, don't include your job waitressing at Chili's or being a waiter in your cover letter. If you help pay your way through school, address it there. But you want to get enough experience so that when you put something together, it shows your experience doing the kind of work that you're going to want to do at a station.
At the college level, get that experience. If you got a college newscast like Ann does there at IU, like Griffin participated in, get every bit of experience you can, right, Griffin?
Yeah, and I would say not even just getting every bit of experience, but holding yourself to really tight deadlines. That was a challenge I really poised for myself senior year, and it really prepared me better for when I did get that Louisville gig of having to turn a gamer in 45 minutes or less and trying to make a package in 2 days or less, not just sitting on footage for 2 weeks and saying, oh, well, let's do tomorrow, I'll get to it. Hold yourself to those tight deadlines and make them tighter and tighter, because when you get in the industry, when you miss a deadline, it's not great, as these guys know. So it's, I would say, push yourself as a student, say, how can I make my school experience more out of a full-time MMJ, a full-time sports anchor, a full-time reporter, as far as what the day-to-day goes. And I went to my experience at Wish, and then I came to IU and said, okay, how can I get that experience at an IU level? And I would say that really, really prepared me. A combination of those two experiences, I should say, really prepared me for this real world station deal.
You're doing great work. You're off to a great start.
Trying.
Well done.
Yeah.
AC, Rob,
it.
any other final
Yeah.
thoughts?
I'll just say this: is if you're going to be successful in this business, you got to have a drive. And that's like anything you do in life, right? So I would just encourage everyone out there, all of us talking here today, we didn't get there by not making sacrifices. You got to make sacrifices to get to where you want to be one day. And, just have that drive, because you got to think of the person, this business is so competitive, and the person next to you wants it just as bad as you. I think all you out there can live out your dreams. You can get to where you want to be, but you have to have a drive in you that sometimes you're not going to make the money like you want. Like, I'll tell you this real quick, a guy named Ron Curtis, and you may remember him, Rob, working in Binghamton, but he was at Syracuse, at CBS station there, WTVH5. He told me this, I'll never forget. He goes, AC, the money will come. That's what he told me. So don't sweat about the salary. Don't sweat. Although I'm asking, where's the money at? No, but don't sweat about those salaries starting out. At the end of the day, you do it because you love it. You have the passion for it. You want to make a difference. You want to tell great stories. And so go for it. Go live your dream, and don't get caught up in all that other stuff. And I'm telling you, you will have a successful career.
It's great advice. Rob, final word?
Sounds like a self-help book, but I've been saying it for best ability. You make yourself available and you do the work. Everybody wants to do what you're doing. Do it better. Work harder than the person next to you, and keep moving. Any decisions you need to make, make them based on your family, yourself, and your career. And you can't go wrong. Don't worry about money. Don't worry about markets. I went from Indianapolis to Toledo. I went from New York to Cleveland. whatever was best for me, my family, and my career is what I did at the time. One word on agents. The late great Larry Pond was my very first agent, hired me in Indianapolis. 2 years later, he was an agent. He called me and said, Rob, you should be making more money. And I said, Larry, you signed me to the contract. What are you talking about?
I too have had a boss who later became my agent and then later went back into another line of work. And in fact, he was the first news director to hire me for an on-air job in Toledo. So it's, you know, it is a small world, right? And whether it's our agents, whether it's our colleagues, you know, we all end up crossing paths again. I'm so glad that we all had a chance to cross paths today. Rob, Anthony, and Jonathan Griffin, we really appreciate the questions that came in, and hopefully this will be a good resource, not just for those who were able to watch it live, but maybe for other classes who are able to watch it back on YouTube down the road. We really appreciate it. And don't forget, everybody also who's a part of our chapter, part of our region, tomorrow is a big day here. We're going to be announcing the nominations for this year's 53rd Annual Great Lakes Emmy Awards, which will be held at the Lucas Estate in Carmel, Indiana, just north of Indianapolis, June 25th. The nominations again come out tomorrow, April 28th, in a live stream announcement at 10:30 a.m. on our website, greatlakesemmys.tv. So thanks again to our panel. You guys were all great. We really appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan.
Thanks.
Had a good time, guys.
Thank you.
Good to
Good to
Thanks,
see you all.
everyone. Thanks. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Okay. Bye-bye.